the Latino, in my opinion, the Latinos that they think they're representing are the Latinos of 25 years ago. It's not the Latinos of today. They have not they have not accepted the fact that that Latinos have shifted to the right, and data has shown that some of the biggest shifts toward Trump in California cities happen in the most Latino cities. And these are, by the way, of course, Trump still lost the general vote for Latinos in California, just like he did nationwide. But still, the shift has been profound. I really do think it's profound. I've seen it in my own family. We're talking about people who, because of various issues, just do not care for the Democrats anymore. And then you have the younger generation, younger Latinos, definitely do not want to vote Democrat and kind of like Trump because they think he's a straight up cholo, a straight up gangster.
The Cholo Trump, that's like a Lalo Alcaraz t-shirt.
I called that in 2016. I'm like, if Cholos were allowed to vote, Trump would overwhelmingly win the Cholo vote.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Latino Vote podcast, coming from you from Elon Musk headquarters here in Washington, D.C., where we're erecting statues of Donald Trump, and Elon Musk has become literally the hand of the president, taking care of all things that need to be taken care of. There are federal workers just littering the streets here in Washington, D.C., and it's a crazy time. Welcome in, Mike Madrid.
Chuck, great to hear from you. The only question I have with that great intro was, are Mexicans building the statues out there? Because I don't see any other way that could possibly get done.
That guy that does is that Steve Bannon called Elon Musk an illegal immigrant who's trying to take over everything this week. So I don't know if they're going to be South African immigrants now, but I've never seen anything that was worth a shit that was built that wasn't built by Mexicans. We both know that, right?
We do know that. And thanks for bringing us in that way. It's always a surprise. I don't think that most of the listeners realize too. Is I'm anticipating Chuck's intro as much as everybody else. So with that wind up, we've got a great guest today, Chuck. I want to kind of talk to you about and introduce you real quickly before we jump into the conversation. His name is Gustavo Arellano. He is very, very well known as probably if not the one of the premier observers. Columnists of Latino food, politics, culture in the country, certainly in California, with a deep history understanding and a great way of articulating kind of the history of Latinos, where it's been, where it's going, and what it means as we kind of transform as a country. We've talked about his articles numerous times here on the show, but now we've got him live and in person, trapped in his compartment, his beautiful French designed library surrounding him, his books of knowledge. Gustavo is going to be tackling a really fascinating issue, I think, in a piece that will probably be out by the time that this airs in a couple of days. We're recording on Wednesday morning as normal, about the changing partisan construct of the state legislature here in California. A lot of guys know how old I am, older than Chuck, better looking and smarter than Chuck, but older than
you
Chuck.
Crossed all the lines. People, bullshit. Have you not seen me? Go ahead.
And, one of my first gigs in Sacramento was working as a young staffer for the Latino Republican, or the Hispanic caucus, as we called it then. It started in large part because we were not allowed into the Latino Legislative Caucus, which was exclusively for Democrats. And over the past 3 decades, it has kind of ebbed and flowed in its sort of different iterations and attempts. Should they be in? Should they not be in? And now we find ourselves after this 2024 election with a record number of Latino Republicans elected in Sacramento. I think a total of 9 now. They're knocking on the door again and saying, we need to be led into the Latino Legislative Caucus. They don't seem to be. The partisan caucuses are at loggerheads, but I think it says something bigger about the Latino electorate. And that's why we wanted to bring in Gustavo Arellano. Sorry about the long wind up, Gustavo, but it's great to have you.
No, gracias for the both of you to have me.
So let's dig into it, brother. I mean, let's did I miss anything on that kind of setup on what's happening here in California?
No. Well, the one thing I would point out is that Latino Republicans are done with being accepted into the Latino Legislative Caucus. The caucus has been around, I think, now for 52 years. That's where the power base of what constitutes California politics in Sacramento now is. Progressive, overwhelmingly on the side of undocumented immigrants. And yeah, for decades, I mean, you were part of these battles. The few Latino Republicans who would get elected to Sacramento, they would ask them, hey, can we join? And the Latino Legislative Caucus would say, no, our bylaws say no, which is such a weak sauce excuse, by the way. But now you have you have Assemblymember Kate Sanchez down here in Orange County, also covering the Inland Empire, and Suzette Valladares, who is a state senator up in LA County. They're saying, you know what? Nah, we don't need the Latino Democrats and their little club. We're going to create our own club straight up. And I think that is indicative of the times we're at, in the sense, not so much of the partisan divide, that's always going to exist, but rather that they're like, we don't need Latino Democrat leaders anymore. That's not what the electorate wants. We're going to try to offer something new. And now, more than ever, we have the numbers to be able to do so. So it's not a fly-by-night operation the way it's been in the past. And more importantly, we're done begging. We don't need to beg. We don't want to hang out with Democrats. So it's total. Mike, because he's a cliche master, would say clicas. I would say old school, just beef, straight up beef.
Can you tell me, so we can give our audience who doesn't live or breathe y'all's liberal bastion of whatever the hell y'all do in California, how many Republican Latino legislators there are compared to Democrats, so we have an understanding?
There is 9 now, which is an all-time record. The all-time record before was just 2 years ago, which was 4. So you have doubled the amount of Latino Republicans in Sacramento. The total number of Latino legislators are 44. So when you put it onto the California general population, what is it? 20% of Latino registered voters in California are Republican, which means that the Latino GOP folks in Sacramento, they roughly correspond to the population. So yes, it is still a small minority. California is the Democrats in California still hold the supermajority of both chambers of the legislature, so both Assembly and Senate. But this is the interesting thing for me, and Mike, of course, will know this. Latino Republicans in Sacramento now make up a third of all GOP legislatures. That is fundamentally what the fuck, given that California Republicans for 30 years actively tried to alienate any and all Latinos who might be into the GOP. So this, what we're seeing right now, is completely historic.
Hang on, Mike. One quick question. You said 20% of Latinos in California are Republican. Is that based off of registration?
Yes.
And there's a ton of them, I'm sure, that are non-party preference that are also Republicans, just like there's a ton of non-party preference that are Democrats. But it's interesting, if 20%, and Mike, if you know this, and not Gustavo, whichever one of you, so 20% registered Latino Republicans, you know what that corresponding number is to Democrats? Is it 40 or 50?
It's going to be over 50, but Mike would know.
It's sitting in the high 40s, low 50s.
Right. And then there's this whole ton in the middle that we know now is going both ways, or if not one way. Okay, cool. Mike, I jumped in there ahead of you.
No, that's helpful perspective. And again, I think that, Gustavo, you just framed this really perfectly. It's not that there's a massive shift of Latinos who are replacing Latino Democrats, although that's happening marginally. It's that now a third of the entire Republican representation in the state legislature, although it's still a super minority, is Latina. More women than men, by the way, more Latinas than Latinos. Yeah. And that, which is the same on the Democratic side, by the way. We've talked a lot about this as well. But that, to me, I think has the potential to be a little bit more transformative. And as you know, this might be my Pollyannish kind of way of kind of trying to see the world as it could be, not as it is. But could that moderate the Republican Party in the way that the Latino, mod Dems, as we call them in California, mod Dems are made up overwhelmingly of Latino moderate Democrats?
No, I absolutely, in my column, my columna, as I call it. So I interviewed Kate Sanchez and Suzette Valladares, and it's a wide-ranging conversation, which of course inevitably has to end on immigration. And one of the main reasons why the California Latino Legislative Caucus, so those are the Democrats, they say they don't allow Republicans in because, oh, you're not going to stand up against Trump and his evil deportation policies. Meanwhile, of course, as I've written about this a lot, Latino, ¿cómo se dice? Latino sentiment toward undocumented immigrants is at the same level now. Their hatred, frankly, of undocumented folks is at the same level as white people were in 1994 in California during Proposition 187. So what Valladares and Sanchez are saying, it's like, first and foremost, they don't agree with everything of Trump's deportation policies. They don't think families, just regular undocumented people, should be deported. They do think that there has to be a crackdown at the border and that they should get deport, as Suzette said, the worst of the worst as fast as possible. But these are not the fire breathers in the Trump bros and Trump gals out in DC or the ones even in Sacramento. To a T, I think all the Latino Republicans are going to have to wrestle, and admittedly so, say we're still GOP and we still voted for Trump, but we are the voices that could moderate the crazier people amongst them. They'll never say it like that, but they definitely, just in talking to them, I could definitely see them staking out that position. And more importantly, though, what they're arguing is that it's Democrats, Latino Democrats, who have made immigration the end all and be all issue for democracy in California. Even as polls after polls show, among Latinos, it's usually the fourth or fifth or even sixth most important position for them. So what these Latino Republicans are saying is like, we're going to try to focus on the issues that Latinos actually care about, as opposed to what Latino Democrats have said Latinos care about.
So I did my homework. I did my own research, as some people do.
Sweet Jesus.
You guys are going to love this. I want to run real quickly through other state legislatures just to give people a perspective on how other states are handling this. Arizona and Texas have bipartisan Hispanic caucuses. Republicans and Democrats can be in both the Arizona state legislature's Hispanic caucus and the Texas Hispanic caucus. And they call it Hispanic caucus, by the way. Florida doesn't have one. They used to have one and it went away, but it was so Republican that there was really no difference between their positions and the Republican caucus. So it's gone away. So for the past 4 years, there's no Latino Hispanic caucus. In Illinois, they have a Latino and a /Latinx caucus.
Oh, wow.
All Democrats, which kind of makes sense.
Which state?
Illinois.
Okay.
Kind of makes sense because it's, that's where it's kind of like where California was 10 years ago, I would argue. There's not a lot of Latino Republicanism yet, but it's probably going to be coming. And then New York, the last of the kind of the large Latino states, they have, get this, they have a Hispanic, African-American, and Asian caucus all together. It's like the non-white caucus, right? And so it's there, in many ways, this is all kind of a story of the unfolding of how different regions and different backgrounds are managing and dealing with sort of the different changing demography of the country. I just thought that was a little bit interesting.
Did you do any research into Colorado or New Mexico?
I didn't.
Because they're post-Latino at this point. Because you've had, I mean, I think your people are from there. There's been Latinos there for what? 400 fucking years.
Mm-hmm. New Mexico, my people from New Mexico. And that I did not. I should have. And there's probably other caucuses. I just wanted to look at kind of the big population states where I knew there would be caucuses. And I wrote about this a little bit, in my book. But this is California's. It's so big. The Latino population is so big and diverse. I mean, it's not as diverse as Florida's, but Florida's is kind of weird anomaly the way it's weird on every front. And I do think that this struggle, this discussion, really is a defining moment on what Latinidad and Latino identity and politics means. And I've struggled a little bit as to whether or not there should or shouldn't be Republicans in this caucus. Should there be a Latino Republican, Latino Democrat caucus? Should there be no caucus at all? Like, if we're going to try to find bipartisan solutions on things, how about you just be legislators and find bipartisan solutions? Right?
Colorblind. No, look, I actually wrote about this last year. I did a 4-part series about the history of Latino politics in Los Angeles. When we talk about Latino politics in the United States, we look to Los Angeles. This is where this was the crucible, the cradle of modern day Latino politics in the United States, especially with its progressive democratic bent. And and one of the questions I asked, at what point do Latino politicians of Latino descent, stop being politicians of Latino descent? Is it now where Latinos are a plurality of the population in California and a majority of the population in LA County? The final part of that series was in the small cities of Southeast Los Angeles County, which about 15 years ago made national headlines for all the rampant corruption. They were the first cities to have all Latino majorities. And what did all these Latino politicians do? They just became corrupt as hell. Now you have a new generation of younger Latinos who are dealing how can you lead as a quote unquote Latino when 96% of the population in your city is Latino? And so their answer was kind of what you're seeing on the statewide politics when it comes to Latino Democrats in California. We have a progressive agenda, working class agenda, and that ties in to Chuck's love work on the Bernie Sanders campaign, where you do have this populist politics and the politicians who are able to make something of themselves kind of go beyond race and really focus on class. And for Latino Democrats, like, the old school guard, your Antonio Villaraigosa, your Richard Alatorres, even to this day, the people who are in the Latino Legislative Caucus, they kind of don't want to get away from that. They kind of want to be Latinos because they want that the moral high ground in their minds to be able to say we represent the most oppressed minority in California. But again, Latinos are no longer a minority anymore, and I don't think they want to wrestle with that.
In most states, we should think about it. I don't think that I have to tell y'all to think about this. This is the way I think about it. What's the purpose of a caucus? And then I think it's different in every place, but I think about the federal Hispanic caucus, and they are almost all Democrats, but like California, have a growing Republican Latinos that I don't think are allowed in the Democratic caucus. Mike, do you know? I think it's just Democrats in the CHC.
It is.
Right.
At the national, federal level, yes.
Yeah. So they are, at their core, I work closely with all of them, a caucus of Democrats who want to make sure that their voice is heard in this large Democratic caucus so that they can band together. You know who's really good at this are the black people. The black caucus is really good at asserting their power within the Democratic Party to say, oh, no. There's like 60 members that are black. We're going to all be together to force you Democrats to do what's best for our people. We represent those communities. You can't leave the black community behind. Now, this may help or hurt my point, but with the Latino caucus, it's not as strong as the black caucus at the federal level. And you have everybody from AOC to Vicente Gonzalez on one side to the far left and to the far right. And then a whole bunch of people in the middle and a whole bunch of people from California. Now, most of their goal is centered around what's the Hispanic caucus going to say about this issue to force their party with the Democrats to fall in line to where they think the community is. I'm not here to argue with either one of you about do they truly represent what their community really thinks or whatever. It's just what I'm saying the job of the caucus is. So Right. It's interesting to hear, and I'd be interested to know, and I think you kind of alluded to this, is you have some of the most anti-immigration Republicans coming out of California, but now you have this growing voice of Latinos, working class folks, these folks that are beating the odds and probably beating other Democratic Latinos to get elected, of like where they find their place in their party that Mike Madrid had to experience 20 years ago was much different than what it is today. Is that correct? Or am I off here?
I think you're right. Yeah, I think it's totally right. Again, the Latino Democrats are 30 some in total. They're still a minority. Their numbers not representative of the Latino population in California. They will all to a T tell you of their struggles against Gavin Newsom, the governor of California. And they will say probably, yes, we need to speak with a united front on issues pertaining to Latinos. But therein lies the rub. The Latino, in my opinion, the Latinos that they think they're representing are the Latinos of 25 years ago. It's not the Latinos of today. They have not they have not accepted the fact that that Latinos have shifted to the right. And data has shown that some of the biggest shifts toward Trump in California cities happen in the most Latino cities. And these are, by the way, of course, Trump still lost the general vote for Latinos in California, just like he did nationwide. But still, the shift has been profound. I really do think it's profound. I've seen it in my own family. We're talking about people who, because of various issues, just do not care for the Democrats anymore. And then you have the younger generation, younger Latinos, definitely do not want to vote Democrat and kind of like Trump because they think he's a straight up cholo, a straight up gangster.
The Cholo Trump. That's like a Lalo Alcaraz t-shirt.
I called that in 2016. I'm like, if Cholos were allowed to vote, Trump would overwhelmingly win the Cholo vote. But now he's winning the freaking Peso Pluma vote. He is like just on so many levels. And Democrats historically, the Latino Republican in California was dismissed as a vendido. Just, why do we even have to bother with them? Mike got that thrown at him. All the Latino Republicans for generations got thrown with that. Now the Latino Republican in California, you can't really call them a vendido anymore because, first of all, like, that's not going to accomplish anything. Not that it ever did, but now it's like, wait, their numbers are growing. Wait, they have a direct connection to all the federal apparatus at this point, between the Supreme Court, Capitol Hill, and the White House. Like, they're still going to say you're traitors to the race, but now it's not as easy to dismiss them anymore.
And that's because Latino voters are changing. And that's, I think, the difference between when, I was doing it old school years ago is a Latino Republican getting elected to Sacramento was a little bit more anomalous. And they would get elected in overwhelmingly white districts. And one of the things I found was that in primaries, Latino Republicans would really, really downplay their ethnicity. But once they got elected, they would really try to leverage it, right? They would try to be more Latino when they were in Sacramento. The Democrats were the exact opposite. They would really leverage their Latinidad in primaries because that's where the growing voter base was. And then they get to Sacramento and they would try to transcend that by downplaying their Latinidad, right? That's how you get like a speaker, Fabian Nunez. That's how you get remember when Antonio was running for mayor of LA, he hated being called the first possible Latino mayor of Los Angeles. Like, it just drove him crazy because he didn't want to be that guy. And again, this is a story of this torturous process of changing Latino identity, and our politics, I think, are reflecting that. I'm just excited to kind of read the column. Do you know when it's going to be coming out?
If this is coming out on Friday, it is out right now.
Oh, perfect.
Well, that's awesome. Let me ask another question. And Mike, I'm sorry to give you a cold question, but I want both of you to answer this. Mike likes for me to give him the questions in advance so he can do this research he's talking about.
He doesn't do research.
This is true. You do him very well. So as you've seen the Republican Latino, whatever, diaspora, whatever fancy Georgetown word Madrid likes to use, as you've seen this grow in California, I'm really interested if you have a bunch of white boys in button-up shirts and khakis running operations for Republicans that have figured out the Latino vote in California, or do you have an emerging group of Latino Republican operatives coming up?
Mike could answer that far better than I can. What I can say is that you are seeing homegrown Latino Republicans advance in the party. I mean, I don't think she's a chair anymore, but Jessica Milan Patterson was a chair of the California GOP for a while. In Orange County, where I'm based, Randall Avila, he is the executive director of the Republican Party in Orange County. And so these are major positions.
Wait, Gustavo. So the first one was the state party?
Yes, the state party.
You had a Latina running the state Republican Party at one point.
Oh, yeah.
Just up until a couple weeks ago for 6 years.
And
she's going to come on the show.
How many other Latino executive directors of a county do you have? Or is that a chair of Orange County? Is that the only one?
That I do not know. But I mean, I don't know. But that's
shocking to itself. This is the home of Ronald Reagan, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No. This is Orange County. And I wrote about this in 2020. Randall Avila, Mexican-American from East Los Angeles, ends up in Orange County. Wait, what? The place that created Prop 187, the place where, all the good Republicans go to die and all the racist jackasses have been there forever. But Orange County itself has changed. And so the good old boys, they still do not get the Latino vote. They're still stuck on the idea, Latinos are Republicans. They just don't know it yet. And so, in my column, actually, Kate Sanchez, the assembly member, she said that in the past, the Republican Party had issues trying to reach this constituency. And then Republicans right now are still trying to, climb their way back up from the hole that they created because of Prop 187. But they are taking those battles to where they need to be taken. Mike said earlier, talking about, historically downplaying their Latinidad. I asked them straight up, are you proud Latinas? And they said yes. So they're not going to shy away from that. But they are winning in areas where the future, I don't want to say power base, but where you have a lot of, for Latino Republicans, their future is going to be not in LA County just yet, because LA County is very blue, but the Central Valley and the Inland Empire. You had, I think, a state senator and a state assembly member, Jeff Gonzalez and Leticia Castillo. They beat members of the Coachella Valley Latino Democratic Machine. This is a machine that goes all the way from the Board of Supervisors to small school boards to Raul Ruiz in Congress. They were able to beat back those candidates that were very, very heavily funded. And so we're not talking about anomalies of like Latinos with names like Marie Alvarado Gil. No, we're talking about a Jeff Gonzalez. We're talking about Leticia Castillo winning in areas that are overwhelmingly Latino. That is huge. That's when you're beating down established Latino political machines. Yes, something has changed.
And so what does the future look like?
We're literally, I'm not saying we're talking about it because we are talking about it, but the momentum is in the hands of California Republican Latinos right now. They feel it. You see it. You cannot, all the wins that they got going from 4 to 9 Latino Republicans in Sacramento, that's not a fluke. That said, what are they going to do with what they have right now? I mean, part of the big problem is going to be Trump. If Trump starts doing mass deportations, again, polls have shown this, that Latinos are against illegal immigration far more than ever before, but they still want a pathway to citizenship. Mm-hmm. They're still not comfortable with the idea of getting rid of families, of just, your dreamers, your DACAers, whatever they call themselves now, of someone who's been in this country 30 years and just working and kind of kept their head down. So it's going to be up to the California Republican Party to stand up against Trump and say, hey, if you just go after the criminals, sure, California Latino Democrats are going to complain about it, but most Latino residents are probably not. They're probably going to be cheering along the way. And, part of that is because in California, the vast majority of Latinos are of Mexican American descent. They don't care and this is true. It's horrible. It's sad to say, but it's true. They don't care if Venezuelans are getting deported. They don't care if Salvadorans are getting deported. They don't care if Puerto Ricans can't be deported because they're American citizens, of course. But in their mindset, they wouldn't care because they're so Mexican-centric. Mm-hmm. But once you start messing with, like, say, El Taquero down the street who's been here for 30 years and her children are American citizens, then there's going to be a problem. And then that's where the California Latino Republicans, they're going to have to figure out, okay, do we stand up to our party or do we just go with Trump? And sadly, most Republicans are on the Trump train come hell or high water.
Gustavo, in the past, in my limited knowledge of the inner workings of Sacramento, and I'll just leave the Sacramento city to the side for another podcast. As you know, I love to talk about Sacramento. But I came to know the Democratic Party and the Latino caucus as two factions in that state. And Mike, jump in here. This is your expertise. Where you had a left-wing, super progressive Democrat Latino from East LA. And then you had what I would call a corporate Democrat who was taking the place of what I would say is a common sense Republican who was more about taxes, took corporate money, was all about development, and fought with his own party from the left Latinos. Do you see a scenario moving forward as you see whatever the reasoning is? And I think we'll have podcasts about why Latinos are, quote unquote, electing Latino Republicans, whether it's because nobody showed up to vote for Democrats or Republicans are really doing something special. But do you think that there's a chance that some of these Democrats that take corporate money that are more middle of the road will be looking to do something different? And it seems like they would be primed to be beat by a Republican if they're already being elected and taking corporate money?
I do not foresee that, at least in the Latinos that I'm thinking of, like Susan Rubio. She represents suburban communities in Los Angeles County. And a lot of my Latino political friends were more wocosos. They despise her. Oh, she's taking money from oil. She's this, and that. But she's in a safely Democratic district. She is not a Republican. She's still,
districts.
Yeah, she, in fact, I think her parents were deported, if memory serves me correct. So to me, what's going to be interesting is how much do these Latino Democratic legislators, how much are they going to stick to the idea of immigration and helping out the undocumented in California as being their primary topic. I mean, they're going to say, no, we're actually about working families. We're actually about this, and that. But look, California is a sanctuary state on steroids. And by the way, I agree with this 1000% on everything from sanctuary state policies to driver's licenses for undocumented immigrants to in-state tuition for so-called dreamers, because they don't call themselves that anymore, and don't call them that. They'll get mad at you. But Latinos are not in that place anymore. They, in California, as in everywhere, they care about the economy. In California, you have Latinos like myself who love their old gas belching cars. They do not want to drive electric cars. So when you have the Democrats in Sacramento pushing that stuff, another big issue, allowing trans men or trans boys in girls' sports. I want to see a poll, because just in my own day-to-day life, and by the way, no one in my family voted for Trump, but they are adamantly opposed to trans folks participating in women's sports. Democrats in California, they have to side with that. They have to side with that because this is such a blue state. So that is a huge opening for Republicans and Republicans to peel off Democrats from that family values and faith vote. I think it's, again, I'm totally for that issue, but Latinos, I would argue, are not for that. And we'll see what happens. So Democrats need to really focus on what Latino residents in California want, which is very much about the economy and not so much anymore about protecting undocumented immigrants.
And can they make that adjustment, Gustavo? Do you think they politically, culturally in the Democratic Party can move beyond that, or is it too calcified into the DNA of the Democrats?
I mean, they're going to have to at least be open to considering that. I will say with the California Latino Legislative Caucus, so you could always tell a Latino from Hispanic, because in California, at least, California Republican, California Latinos who are Republican, they use Hispanic, and then the Latino Democrats use Latino. So the Latino Legislative Caucus in December, I did a front page story for the LA Times about this historic moment, about so many Latino Republicans now in Sacramento. And so I talked to Lina Gonzalez. She's the chair of the Latina Legislative Caucus. And she said, look, yes, we're having these discussions about whether we should allow Republicans in. It's probably not going to happen because we have a lot of things that we need to work on. But even that, the idea that there's conversations happening about that represents progress. If you could call it progress, but let's just say that at least represents something new that's happening in the history of Latino Democrats. As I said earlier, they're no longer saying, the Latino Republicans, that stupid cousin from Newport Beach who's completely clueless about what's actually happening to Latinos, who names their kids Jeff and Cerise and all of that. Nope. Now they're the cousin who's coming from East LA, who, fourth or fifth generation from there. And we love that cousin. So we can't just dismiss them anymore. We have to hear them rant about Trump and trans issues and all that, but they're no longer the idiot. They're now more and more of those cousins are becoming, more and more of those cousins are outing themselves in that sense.
How much of this comes from, I want to be sensitive about the way I say this, about believing you are a minority on both sides. And this is what I told the Senate Democratic Caucus too. I was like, Latinos, quit being minorities. You're the party now. Lead it as the majority. Create the vision. You set the agenda. For 30 years, you've followed the agenda of kind of the white progressives in your caucus, and you allowed yourself to kind of take these small marginal crumbs and represented just the issues of the undocumented. I get it. I'm not going to be critical of that. It's a part of our history, but you did it at the expense of working class people. And you allowed the agenda of white, wealthier, college-educated people to be what the Democratic Party is, and our people got left behind, and now they're saying, yeah, basta enough, I'm out, checking out, brother, I'm done. And that comes from believing you're not in charge. You're in charge now. Like, stop.
They would say that no, their agenda has uplifted Latinos, working class Latinos especially. They're going to cite all the protections for unions in California. It is very much a progressive agenda, and they're doing that. But all of that said, that's going to be their defense. But again, they're not paying attention to what's going on the street across the state. They're not going to be paying. One of the big debates I had in 24 with Democrats, and this is where I knew that Biden was Biden once and then became Harris was doomed. When people are complaining about the price of gas. People are complaining about the price of eggs, all of that stuff. And yet Democrats would refuse to say, oh, we are in a recession. We are facing problems. Oh, no, the S&P index is the highest it's ever been. Oh, no, this, and that. I'm like, oh, man, you are not paying attention. You're not hanging. I mean, say what you will about Ruben Gallego out in Arizona, the senator, but he's talking to those guys. He's going to the UFC matches. He's talking about trocas. He's talking about fucking mamalonas and all of that stuff. These Democrats in Sacramento are not. Too many of them are driving electric cars, and nothing against electric cars, but you have a different worldview when you're driving a freaking GMC Yukon with three benches of rows in the back, as opposed to when you're driving a Prius or a RAV4 hybrid. It's a big, huge difference. I wrote a column, was it last year or 2023? But when the California Air Resources Board, when they said we are going to ban roaming in California by 2028. So goodbye, shiny ass bumpers and rims and all of that. And so I said, this is a direct attack on working class Latinos who love their lowriders, who love their beautiful cars, the old school cars, because now all cars are made of plastic. And I got a lot of pushback from progressive white folks, gabachos for sure, but also progressive Latino lawmakers who said, oh no, our communities are being poisoned. And so I did research, and no, it really wasn't. The numbers were, I don't want to call them overblown, but the numbers were not at the point where people were saying they are. So if you're not paying attention to small issues like that, then yeah, you're sealing your own fate. You're writing your own obituary. Again, California is still a very democratic state, still super majorities in Sacramento, but there's movement against you. What are you going to do about it? Sticking to the old ways is not going to help at all. And again, is going to sign you off to a slow decline. Empires rise, empires fall. Is the Democratic Empire in California, are they at Rome state right now, Imperial Rome state right now? We'll see.
Mike Madrid knows I love when we talk about monster trucks, and I'm the Democrat. And so I don't think your research is absolutely perfect, which nobody expected it to be, but I'm the Democrat here, and I have a monster truck, and I have, anyway, I'll leave all the things I've done to the side because it could get me put in jail. But I think what you're seeing, put in jail again. Anyway, what you're seeing in California is, as Mike says, sometimes like it's something that could be happening in other places as well. You've had Democrats in control for a long time there, and you have both ends of the party. Some of the most liberal people that I know live in California, around East LA. And I think about the congressional delegation. I keep going back to the federal guys because that's what I know. I can't tell you who the state legislature is in any of these places where Mike's been talking about where there's been this dramatic swing. But I know that there's a changing of the guard happening at the federal level, right? You've had somebody like Raul Ruiz, who's been there for a long time now, who got really close and probably underperformed in that district. Harris did by a ton, but luckily he didn't because he has name ID in the Coachella Valley there of working people that know him as a doctor that came back home to take care of poor people. And then the opposite side of that is you have somebody like Gil Cisneros, who's now, representing an area where it was the congresswoman who was there. What was her name? Gustavo, the wife.
Young Kim?
No, it was the one that was up around. Anyway, all these older Latinas who had retired, Napolitano.
Oh, Grace Napolitano, yeah.
Right. Like, so she had left, and then the Roy Ball Allard left. And so you saw these other folks coming in, right? You see a Jimmy Gomez who's trying to figure out, like, is he more left? Is he more center? How is he going to represent this district? He's taken on by a Korean every year. They're well financed. They're well organized. So watching how the delegation moves, Salud Carbajal all the way down to Vargas in San Diego, and then all the things in between with Annette Barragan and Linda Sanchez, I really watch how they're dealing with their politics at the national level because they're taking on the absurdities of lots of things that the Trump administration is doing. To your point about deportation is just one of them that could really affect the midterms and the governor's race and the midterm elections in California because of a national narrative of Republicans going too far. and needing a check on these Republicans. Well, that could be the same, you could say, in the state house, because all races, unlike 20 years ago, are very nationalized. We run to our political corners, right? And so I think that that's something that I'm keeping an eye on. And my last question to you, and I'll kick it back to Mike after you answer, is do you see, and I saw you smile when I mentioned some of those names, is there anything you see happening with the congressional delegation that's telling any of these stories?
Every single one of them would be considered a moderate in the California Latino Democratic world. Linda Sanchez would probably be the most left of them, and she's pretty left, but nope, she's pretty moderate. Like, and you forgot to mention my guy, Lou Correa, who's totally moderate, who graduated from, born and raised in Anaheim, my hometown as well. Jimmy, and then of course the other person, probably the one who's definitely making that push to wave the banner of California Latino Democratic politics is Robert Garcia from Long Beach, the former mayor, LGBT. Both of his parents died of COVID, of Peruvian descent. So that makes them unique, because almost the rest of them, I believe, are all of Mexican-American descent. So I think Robert's the youngest of that batch. I think he's the one who really exemplifies what's actually happening in California, in Sacramento. The rest of them, in my opinion, and some of them I think the only one who was actually in Sacramento of that group was Lou Correa, but they all learned how to play the DC game, which is going to temper their tendencies to maybe go a little bit more to the left. And they all come, yes, from overwhelmingly Latino districts. Raul out in the Coachella Valley, he was part of that Coachella Valley machine, although the folks back home, and the politicians, think he's too much to the right. Pete Aguilar, that's another one that you forgot to mention. He's another, well, he actually comes from that area as well. So I think in terms of looking toward the midterms, they're all going to be safe, but what are they going to do to try to rally the base in their own districts on those lower races when it comes to California? And that's the other thing. Right now, the most prominent Latino who has thrown his proverbial hat into the gubernatorial race is Antonio Villaraigosa. I like Antonio. I think he's historic. Every Latino that I've talked to, when I mention Villaraigosa is going to run for governor, they roll their eyes and they say he is not going to win. What's the point of him running? Allow a younger Latino to run. But who is that younger Latino? There is no younger Latino that can match up, that has a fighting chance on the Democratic side to be able to become governor of California.
Before I kick this to Mike for the last question, I want to remind the viewers, when we're talking about why California matters, not just to these two California hoodlums that are on the call right now, but to the nation, is this morning I came up with a new target list about another project that I'm working on with my team. And here are marginal congressional seats in California for the next midterm that have more than 25% Latino population that are 50-50 districts. Here we go. California 9, California 13, California 22, California 45, California 47, California 41, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 congressional districts with more than 20% Latino population. Most of these are Latino majority districts, but there are a couple of small ones in Orange County and others that they have 20 to 30%, will make up who controls Congress again this midterm. Literally, there's a 3-seat majority for Republicans right now if they win all these specials, and 7 marginal seats for you two. I'm flashing a list in front of the camera to look smart because I wrote it down while Mike was thinking. 7 seats in California will determine who controls Congress, and it'll be the Latino voters. Mike?
I mean, one of those districts, you're all about the numbers, Chuck. I just know who the people are and say, oh, yeah, it's that area, that area. But one of those districts that was flipped in 24 was in Orange County. Michelle Steele, the worst of the worst Republicans, she lost her seat to a Vietnamese American, Derek Tran. And the margin was razor thin. And I wrote a column about a group called Chispa, a 501c. Well, they created a 501c4, but Chispa had historically been focused on issues pertaining to undocumented folks in the city of Santana. Santana was not part of Derek Tran's district, but they saw an opening. They saw how many Latinos were in that district. So they went out, they did their own PAC. I think they raised $500,000 and went out there knocking on doors. And the margin, I think, was like 2,000. And they showed me their list, and they said they were able to get, say, 10,000 Latinos to go out and at least take their phone calls. So, and these are super, super progressive. Derek Tran is not a super progressive. He voted for Lake and Riley or whatever the hell that bill was called. So already they learned how politics work in DC, but at least they were able to flip that seat. So even though we've been talking mostly about the rise of Latino Republicans in California, which I do believe is a thing, the established Democrats, they should be listening to the younger folks who are involved in politics. So far on the younger sphere, it is overwhelmingly progressive. They're the ones who are marching. We're marching all year for Palestine. They're the ones who are marching right now, waving the Mexican and Salvadoran and Honduran flag. They're the ones who, if the Democrats are smart, they're going to channel into those young voters or people maybe who are not even registered to vote and get them back into the fold of the Democrats. And especially if Trump continues to go down the way that he's putting this entire country through right now. I mean, we're insulated very much here in California, but we'll see.
I'm expecting a very robust discussion, especially on the YouTube channel. So I want everybody to weigh in here with your thoughts on whether or not the Latino caucuses nationwide should be bipartisan, whether they should have separate caucuses or whether they should have a caucus at all. I think this is going to be one of the most fascinating discussions heading into the midterms, because it is really foundational to Latino politics, where we're heading as a people and what all that means. Second, I want to really point out, Gustavo said something really important, which frankly merits its own, probably new episode. And we'll be having you back a lot, Gustavo, because
please do.
A lot of what you do, and want to make you kind of a regular voice here. But there's a movement towards the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, in Los Angeles. The shift away from the Democrats is not necessarily towards Trump, it's towards DSA candidates. And you're seeing that not just in LA, most pronounced in LA, but you're seeing it broadly. There's a reason why, and Chuck, is famous for this, that Theo Bernie was doing so well in a lot of these same precincts. It's in many ways an emergent populist moment. It's not necessarily that Latinos are becoming more Republican, although they are as a matter of reality and fact and a binary choice. But when other choices are given, you are seeing a lot of younger people moving further towards the left, away from the Democratic Party and away from the establishment Democratic politics and to the left. So that's a whole different dynamic. It's an extremely important one. I think it's going to be a big part of the next chapter of Latino politics. But I do want to also mention that a lot of the names that were mentioned here too, Congressman Lou Correa, Congressman Raul Ruiz, Congressman on and on and on. A lot of these are, as you mentioned, quite accurately. They've defined sort of this moderate middle pendulum swinging in Sacramento and in other places. And the question as to whether or not this emergent sort of establishment, or whether it's going to be this younger, more DSA type of anti-democratic candidate, is going to be the balance of power that either holds Congress or picks up Congress for the Democrats, or sets it back even further. And it's going to be all determinative on the way Latino voters break, looking at different generations, looking at different degrees of removal from the immigrant experience, looking at economic class, looking at education levels, looking at all of these complex, rich, vibrant, part of who we are as a people. So, Gustavo, let me just say thank you so much for joining us today. This is incredibly insightful. Read the article today, the column today, Los Angeles Times. We will include it in our link here, too, so that a nationwide audience gets it directly from us. But fascinating, as always. I'm looking forward to seeing what you say about it more. I know this is not the last of the discussion. This is just the beginning. And again, we're going to be having you on a lot more regularly, especially when you've got some of these columnas that are speaking right to this dramatic time of change. And we appreciate you and your voice and what you're doing.
Yes, Gustavo, thank you for being on. Thanks for putting up with Mike Madrid. And for all of you listening at home, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Last week, we led the episode with Christina Sensu with asking you to sign up for our YouTube channel. And I want to thank all of you who signed up, including my mama, who I had to explain what YouTube was, my cousins, folks that live out in the stick who still have dial-up on the AOL. They got on their internets. They signed up. If they can do it, and you live in a big city where you got one of them Stargates or whatever it is to get you the internets, sign up for the YouTube. And when it says subscribe, I had to explain to my mama that it don't cost you nothing. You can just hit the subscribe button and it lets you know when we have a new episode out. Most times when you subscribe, when you used to get them magazines in the mail with a penny thing on the postcard, you subscribe meant they would take $150 out of your checking account in 6 months. No. This is free. You just hit the subscribe button and you get our stuff first. So subscribe to the YouTube channel. Make sure you share this episode. Give us a review. If you want to say how much you enjoy my buttery voice. And you don't like Mike Madrid, you feel free to give that review if that's where your heart takes you. If you're there at church on Sunday morning and the Lord is touching you, you got to put it out there and let folks know. Listen, subscribe, call your mom if you're lucky enough to still have her. And until next week, y'all be good.